What is up, everybody? My name is Richard Terrell. I go by Kirby Kid, and you are watching our design-oriented deep dive Footsies fundamentals, or design-oriented deep dive fighting Footsies fundamentals, or something like that, right? We got Footsies, we got fighting games, and we are trying to get to the very bottom of what makes fighting games tick, what makes them enjoyable, and why people struggle so hard to get better at them. So this was an interesting, unique opportunity. I stumbled upon this game called Footsies. I heard about it many years ago, saw a video of people playing it, and it's essentially a an incredibly stripped down fighting game. Right here, and I'll go into training mode to show you. So I have a Kirby hat, by the way. That's my custom hat I paid money for. No, no. It's essentially this is an incredibly stripped down fighting game. You only have a handful of moves. I can show you the moves right here on the screen. You have kick, knee, special kick, uppercut, and these are the special rarer moves. Uppercut, uh, secret demon attack, and then you have forward dash, back dash, and parry. If you attack their guard too much, you break their guard, and you can block just by holding back like in Street Fighter, and you can walk by moving forward and back. So it looks like a lot more moves than it actually is. You really do have one button, two directions, and like two different moves you can do. So with that said, the game I found to be incredibly interesting, incredibly deep, and worth all of our time and attention analyzing it. So here's the deal. A lot of people say that fighting games are too hard, and there's a whole other chunk of people that try to get good at fighting games and they do not succeed. And there's a lot of reasons why somebody can fail at doing something like this, but a lot of times, for fighting games in particular, there's these conceptual mental hurdles that they have a really hard time getting over. So we're going to take this super stripped down game, and because it's a fighting game, if you ever were curious about what a fighting game is, we did a whole Dio video series on it. I think it was called Fighting Fundamentals. But essentially, it's a real-time melee combat strategy game. It relies largely on human versus modes, and it's balanced around double-blind interplay. And all these things are going to be important for our discussion today. If Footsies did not have all these elements, we would not be here. We would not be playing it. I wouldn't care. It wouldn't be very fun. So many other negative things. But because, as minimal as it is, it hits exactly the kind of design elements it needs to achieve this. It does so in spades. So we're going to take a look at that. But before we get any further, I got my brother Marcus on the mic. Say hey.
Hello.
And Marcus and I have been playing fighting games since we could get our hands on it. Literally in the arcades. We didn't own any fighting games in our home until, what was it? Ninja Turtles Fighter for Genesis. That was our first fighting game.
Genesis.
Yeah.
Yeah, we played that before Arcade Fighters. Well,
We probably played
mm,
arcade fighters, but
Mortal Kombat.
yeah, like
Maybe
I
Mortal
remember playing
Kombat.
Mortal Kombat like when I was really little, like elementary school when I was 11, I think, 10. But yeah, so we go way back. It's one of our favorite game genres. We made a fighting game, Bar Ball. It's part of Sports Friends. We're big into Smash Brothers. We've done something special every generation, from playing, competing, throwing tournaments to doing community analysis and surveys to providing interesting websites to help gather tech and teach Smash Brothers. And our last project was the Discord community to help teach people Smash Brothers. So this is kind of where it all comes together. We tried to teach people this game. Uh, we tried to, like, we're not the best players, but we tried to give them what we know. And what we know is a lot of fundamental concepts on how to play a fighting game. And that seems to be one of the hardest things to teach people. It seems to be when you pick up the game and play it all by yourself and just play a lot of games, it's going to be the first thing that you'll miss and the first thing that you need to get better. And the longer you play without realizing it, the harder it is to switch. So we were talking to actual players, young kids, students, if you will, trying to get better at Smash Brothers. We'd listen to what they had to say. We tried to make ourselves better at Smash Brothers and all of our friends. So we have a lot of experience in all the wrong ways to approach getting good at fighting games, but we also did very well for ourselves, so we kind of know what it takes to be good. So this is your opportunity, though. We do a lot of interesting discussions and super deep dives here on Dio, but a lot of times people just don't have the experience we have. Sometimes people have never played a fighting game, never played it seriously, don't have the time, don't have the community, whatever. All kinds of, I'm not excuses in the good way, all kinds of reasons why they never quite took that first serious step. But Footsies is so simple and it's cheap. It's free on mobile too. So if you have no money, you probably have a phone because that's just how the world works. You can play it for free and join in on this discussion. So before I spoil anything for you, if you go to the link, which will be in the description, you can follow this schedule and kind of put yourself through this entire fundamental training experience, right? It starts with you downloading the game. You can download it here. Pick which version, whatever version works for you, whichever one you want to go for. You play the game, and then you play some more. You take a survey about what you think about the game. It's survey number one. And then, if you have the time, even just like an hour or two, whatever, if you really try to get good, as they say, if you put effort into learning the moves, trying to beat other players, it has online play. So if you were curious, you can play other players or play people locally. But you should really try to get good just like you would on your favorite fighting games or just like you would trying to take any game seriously. That's super important because if you don't take it seriously, none of this really matters, right? Like, what's the secret to getting good at fighting games? I don't know. I didn't give any effort. Well, then that's your first problem. So if you actually give it effort, you will. That's like the last important thing you need to do to make this whole experience work for you. So get good. Try to get good. Put as much time as you're willing to put into it. And right when you're at your breaking point or right when you think you've gotten good at it, take the second survey, right? The second survey is about people who have tried to get good, and it talks all about, it asks all kinds of questions about how they tried to get good, and we're going to study the results in a few seconds. But now we're on this step, study the Dynamap. So I constructed this visualization to help us understand the game, and we're going to be able to see the structure. And if you want, you can add comments if you sign into Figma. It's all web-based, it's free, so don't worry about that part. But we got Marcus here, and the first thing that I wanted to show was this core map here. Now, this is an organizing structure that I came up with when working with Tough Love Arena, another free to play on mobile, really cool fighting game that you can play and learn a lot from, and it's a lot of fun. But at this time, we're starting with the core rules. And before you even start to play the game, before you start to develop strategies, there are basic moves in the game. So this is like where every player starts. What do the buttons do and how do they work, right? But then the very next, when you go into a game and play other people, you are going to always be using one of these moves. These are the only things you can do in a fighting game. And it's important to realize, what they are and kind of how they work together before you even think about strategy and all that other stuff. But the second layer here is defense and punishes, right? So if somebody is doing that to you, or if you're doing those moves to somebody, what can they do to avoid taking damage and punish you back for it? Punishes are a general term we use in fighting games, but that's essentially what it means. What gets me in trouble when they defend properly? But then we have these other rings for counterplay. So what do you do once they do the thing to stop the thing you're doing? And it just goes back and forth like that until somebody ends up being in the advantage. And we don't have to worry about the outer rings, but we're going to start right here in the center. Now we talked about the fighting game double blind core, um, double blind interplays at the core of fighting games, and a lot of people describe this as being like paper, rock, scissors. So it's a little different with footsies, but as you can imagine, if you can block, that's one option. And movement, we're just throwing movement and block together in the same sort of defensive area. You can attack, and we got these basically 4 different attacks you can do: knee, kick, special, uppercut. And then this is like a secret move, and it technically is a grab because it can grab people through blocks. So I put it down here. But once you understand how all these pieces work together, you get a really good idea of the basic interplay of the game. Um, Block beats people attacking you. So if they throw out any of these attacks and you hold back, you beat it. So block beats attack. If you attack into this grabbing move, normally in fighting games, the attack wins, and this time you kind of lose. But don't worry about that right now. And then if somebody grabs and you're just holding block, you die, right? That's the basic idea. But like I wrote about on my blog a long time ago, games often have reverse directional interplay as well. So the opposite happens, right? If somebody attacks, they can beat you if you're just forward dashing. You'll be exposed because you're moving into their punches. If you try to block someone's attack and they run out of block points, they will break. And being broken like that, you throw up your arms, and it's a really bad place to be. Um, and so on and so forth, right? There's ways to maneuver around this grab, and there's ways for the grab to beat attack boxes, and there's even ways for different attacks to beat other attacks, depending on the timing and the spacing. So what may seem like a basic rock, paper, scissors is actually a little bit more complicated than even in this very simple game that people give it credit for. And just looking at it from a high level, you can see most of the bubbles here that contain your attacks are in the attack triangle. There's four, right? And there are three basic things you can do to defend. So there's more ways to attack than defend. And there's more complexity leaning over here on the right side anyway. So most of the things that you're going to worry about and most of the things that make fighting games complicated is dealing with the complexity of attacking. But yeah, so does most of this echo what you already know, Marcus? Anything to add?
No, looks solid.
So describe some of your first experiences playing Footsies. Like you picked it up a couple of weeks ago, right? When you started this whole little adventure.
What did I do? I think I just played training mode,
Yeah.
uh, which is not what I usually do. In a new fight, if you typically enter a new fighting game, it's versus, obviously, for arcade. Either versus CPU, usually another person. Well, maybe usually CPU, then next common person. Um, yeah, my first exposure to a fighting game is never training mode.
hmm
And that's what I did with Footsies. Um, Mostly because I thought it was Footsies more of as a training
Yeah.
game than a normal game.
That's
Like
actually
Footsies, I don't think is fun unless you are good at it.
yeah, that's a good point. Really good point. So the concept of footsies is something that we covered in a video before, but it's essentially playing at the edge of reactability and punishability using various attacks that you have in the game. Because if you don't attack, you don't win in these games. So using various attacks. And footsies is like one of the hardest things for people to deal with because we'll just for now say you're playing on the edge of your reactions and your knowledge. So that's difficult. This game, even though it tries to simplify all the complex things in other fighting games, say ignore all that. We're going to give you the basic elements that you need to play footsies. And because it's called footsies, we expect you to get good at playing footsies. And there are three main kind of concepts that people new to fighting games just simply don't have, and that's why these mini games teach it to you. Hit confirm was when you attack the opponent and confirm whether it's hit or blocked, and you press the attack button again only when you get a hit. So this is the primary way. If you just mash attack in this game, nothing really happens. But if you go up to him and just mash it, the second kick comes out, and that kick is highly punishable. So this minigame's all about like, hey, you need to react to whether or not you hit or miss, and then only do the second kick when I missed it right there. Only do the second kick when you hit. That's pretty hard to react to. You can see the little reaction UI pop up on the left. Because if you don't, like that. So 16 frames of reaction in a game that runs at 60 frames per second. That's a quarter of a second, right? You got to be on it, right? It's not easy. That's why the minigame tests your ability to do it. That's interesting, right? Another concept is Whiff Punish. So you wait for your opponent to perform an attack and attack back. Press the attack button 2 times to KO the opponent, right? So this is Whiff Punishing. And the computer is going to shimmy back and forth kind of in an annoying way. And I was 19 frames in my reaction speed. It's too slow. You have to be 17 or faster. Frame 17, good. But you saw how like quickly I had to hit that button. This is not easy. So when I say on the edge, of your strategy and reaction, I mean it. Your ability to stay on that edge, how many seconds you can stay on that edge and focus is one skill in of itself, but how quickly you can get back into it is a completely different skill. And recently added to this game is the parry. It allows you to avoid all damage by hitting. Oop, you're supposed to attack them afterwards, but if you hit forward, which normally exposes your face to getting kicked, if you hit it right before you get kicked, you actually parry it. It's on the edge of risk and reward, right? Big risk, big reward. And in this case, I got kicked in the face. So I'll show you what it looks like. About 17 frames of reaction too, like that. So that's what they expect you to do. You train on these concepts because that's all there really is to do in this game. It's really no, I play my favorite character. There's no, I love this stage. There's no fireballs to chuck or other things to distract yourself with. This is the core of what makes fighting games good, and this game is all about it. Cool. Anything else to add? Cool.
Not ridiculous. I was just thinking that the design space of a normal fighting game is expansive enough that there will be a lot of asymmetric relationships between characters in a matchup. So
Mm.
essentially, you don't have to learn the game to be able to play well
Oh,
against certain characters.
yeah. Even that concept alone is something we're gonna hopefully show in this diagram pretty soon. But what's good about Footsies is all the characters are the same and you don't have a lot of moves, so there's no matchup considerations whatsoever. You're as good as your opponent in terms of potential. You just got to make it happen with your actual skills. So that kind of brings us to the big question. With so few moves and not a lot to do in the game, how do you get good at this game? Like, how good can someone get at this game? I think that's always the first question. And a lot of times people get into fighting games by watching high level play, speed running as well. And they go, whoa, that looks so cool, and they're so good. And then they start the long journey of maybe potentially getting up to that level. So people get inspired and they see what's possible, and then they move forward knowing that there's something out there. That's not all. That's not the case with all the games you played. We played Smash Brothers from day one in 64 and beyond, and there was no internet website talking about how deep Smash Brothers was. There was no community before we made it ourselves. There was nothing out there, but we just believed in the game. And it's just a matter of digging deeper, one step at a time. Like one more trick you can develop, one more thing you could do to play a little safer, a little better, or investigate it elsewhere. And a lot of times we look back on things and go, yeah, the game's deep. Well, we're taking a little bit of a different approach here. But on a fundamental level, everything in Footsies is made up of these different attacks, and these attacks have a way to input them, or the command, different properties, like you can cancel this kick into a special, and frame data, right? Frame data, it takes 5 frames to even come out. It stays out and hurts people for 2 frames, and then for the next 17 frames, it retreats back to the user, to the attacker. If you hit somebody, they are -1. So, or you are -1. So if you hit someone clean and you do damage, you recover 1/60th of a second after they do. But if they block it, you recover 3/60ths of a second after they do, which means they can get the tiniest little timing advantage on you, and so on and so forth. A lot of people don't know how to interpret frame data, so if you just play the game as is, if you just look at it and go, cool, punches and kicks, I'm going to do it, that's perfectly good way to move forward. And just getting used to all these different attacks is always like the first good step. So we can take a look right now at Marcus's. Let's take a look at the results. Say it right here. So yeah, Footsie's website here. Buy it. The first survey was right here. Marcus took the survey. Has information about how he played, how he first came to the game, whether or not he did the tutorial, did he do any of the mini games, and these are some of the scores for the mini games. Um, there's some options you can turn on, so it asks you whether or not you fiddled with those, and so on and so forth. Good first survey. But this second survey is one that I had people take on the Footsies Discord channel. So these are some of the best players of Footsies in the world, or that you can find. And some of their skill level ranges from the purple. 33% of the people said, "I think I can win a tournament." Right here. Uh, 13% of the people said they win most of the matches they play. 33%, half the matches they play, they win. And then there's just some people that just know the basics. But this is interesting, right? Roughly half the people here are good at the game. You could say like really good. And then about half here say that they played for over 40 hours. Now stop. This is all there is to the game. Just this. Just this. And just this. That's it. No extra characters, no extra stages, no extra music, no extra bells and whistles. Playing this for 40 plus hours is what some of the best players have done. And I think sometimes people hear a stat like that and they think, well, of course, there's somebody out there that always obsesses about something, and that doesn't quite explain it, right? This isn't this isn't like I've listened to 40 hours of my favorite song over the course of my lifetime. This is different. We're still gamers. We still want to enjoy the time that we put into games. Playing this game isn't necessarily a way to relax, or we don't experience it passively. We wouldn't play if we weren't interested. We wouldn't play if it didn't hold our interest and challenge us and give us something to work towards. But the game is only this. So how does that happen? Like that's one of the mysteries we're gonna uncover first. But I just think it's really interesting when you look at it. Some people play this game and go, yeah, 10 minutes, over 40 hours, and I'm in this club as well. So some of the other questions are for the top players, what do they do to self-improve? And some options are taking notes. And as you can see here, 7%, 7 out of 15 people take notes. And you see how it's just slightly under half, and you see this distribution, right? This is slightly half, and see this distribution. Do you think that's a coincidence? I don't think it is, but we're gonna keep moving. Have you taught someone how to play? Right, the Feynman method. 14. Oh, this one's. Have you ever talked about strategies? So almost everybody who plays this game uses language to articulate their strategies to somebody else. I don't know who, but it doesn't matter. Most of the people have taught someone how to play, right? Like, hey, play this game. I like it. Here's what I do. Blah, blah, blah. Here's how you can get good. Most of the people. Almost everybody goes in the training mode to lab, and this person says, maybe. Maybe. That's a yes. I don't know. So have you watched videos of your matches? A little split between the two halves, right? Have you watched better players than you play? Almost everybody has. Do you have a plan when you play? Or do you have fun when you take the game seriously? People are still having fun, and yes, they take the game seriously, 40 hours plus. And do you have a plan? You know, mixed results. Sometimes people just play by feel, but everybody's got a plan, and everybody has a history, and everybody has a tendency. So this is kind of an interesting question to see if people say they have a plan or not. It doesn't. This question isn't as important as the others. And this final last one, 100%. Have you ever lost many times in a row playing other players? 100% of the time. The best players said yes. Like many times, as in like I can't beat this guy. What's wrong with me? Wow, I can't even touch him. That kind of a thing. Like they get beat down. 100% of the players, and that's not, and I think it's a little bit more than just, oh, everyone gets beat down when they first play. Not everyone, for one. For two, when you first play, if you play at the very beginning when the game's released, everyone's about as bad as you, supposedly. So you may end up being 50-50 in terms of winning and losing. I'm talking about getting beat down, and you're like, what the heck? I thought I knew how to play this game, and everyone has experienced roughly something like that. So a lot of people give a lot of different kinds of advice on how to improve. Tons of videos on YouTube. I liked breaking it down to what modes in the game you actually play, because everybody has access to these modes, and the distribution should tell you something. Like arcade, it's even across the board. Versus players, that's like local, right? Maybe some people don't have a local person to play with. That makes sense. Versus CPU, a little bit more. The CPU is always there and you can play it at any time. Okay. The CPUs in the game are designed around certain personalities, so it can give you a lot of help there. Online versus matches, yeah, a lot of people play to improve. Training mode, 10, more than half. play a lot to improve. That's so the yellow's a lot and red's a little. So training mode is like almost everyone plays training mode to improve, and that's super important. Um, you can't get really better at anything without practice and deliberate practice and focus, and training mode's the best place to do it. There's no getting around it, right? Sometimes you see people play like, man, they're winning every tournament. They're playing all the matches. They never stop playing matches and beating people in tournament. You don't see what they do to practice most of the time. Most of the time, they are putting dozens of hours a week practicing, and that's how they get better. It seems to be a requirement. Um, Almost nobody plays the customized hat building mode to get better. Good. And then there are some options you can fiddle with to get better, but most people are like, doesn't matter. The defaults are good. So, your mindset when learning is incredibly important to how well you can do. This is not something I'm just saying. I could pull up the research later, but essentially, self-talk, how you talk to yourself, greatly influences how receptive you are, how much you learn, how much you retain after a learning experience or in a learning environment. It's a big deal. So, what you let yourself believe, even the idea of complaining, like if you complain, you could really be holding yourself back. And this question in particular is asking people what their thoughts are like, right? First one, my reactions are too slow for consistent whiff punishing. You saw how hard it was for me to do it on stream. Um, it's at the edge of decent reaction times, right? Anything roughly in the 15 frames range to react is very tough. And 18 is the cutoff. That's hard. So a lot of people, if you're old like me, if you're old like us, you're like, oh, our reactions can't keep up with the kids. And whether that's true or not, I wanted to see what other people thought. And some people currently think that the reactions are too slow for consistent with punishing. Some people think that they did think that, but maybe they no longer currently think it, and then, so on and so forth. The next one is I can't stop overcommitting when they block. So the worst thing to do in this game is to mash attack and go for it, and if they block you, you are KO'd for the round 100% of the time. No one has ever missed that I've ever seen. Um, so if you keep doing that, you're gonna lose. And I wanted to know if people ever thought that, like I can't stop doing it. Some people did. Some people never thought that. Maybe they were focused from the beginning, but it's a distributed answer. Defense is too strong in this game. Most people said no. Waiting for the opponent to open up is boring. Most people never thought that. Some people did. But did is in past tense, right? Uh, my success seems random. A little mixed, right? Some people currently do, right? Your success could essentially be random if you find someone at equal skill level. Then, the slightest difference in timing could be the difference between victory and not victory. So I could see how somebody could think that and still be perfectly not making excuses there. There's not enough skill possible for different playstyles. Nobody really thinks that. A little mixed bag here of I, I can't get my opponent to do what I want, right? A little mixed bag. Mixed on this game's all about reads. Attackers don't get enough advantage. Most people don't think that. I can't win playing how I want to play. Some people currently do. Yep, that's a thing. I do the same thing as my opponent and I lose every time. One person currently thinks that. And I put that question in there, that thought, that statement, because there's a very particular time in your growth where that could happen. And I wanted to see if anybody else ever thought the same thing. Because I've heard people say it. uh, this move is too good. No one really says that about this game. This game is in balance 100%. Nobody thinks this game is in balance, which is good. This game's not for me. Fighting games are not for me. Control inputs are inconsistent. One person still thinks that. I don't know how to use training mode. Most people never say that because they spend all their time in training mode, but 2 people currently think so that's interesting. And I don't know how to improve, right? So this information on the bottom is, we can go by it quickly, but essentially it's asking people if they think a move is too strong or how often they use it. The more red you see, the more people think it's balanced. It's almost red skyscrapers the whole way through. People think this game is really balanced, not just in an overall sense, but on a move-to-move basis. And pink is people knowing the frame data. So as you can see here, there's some moves that people don't really know the frame data of, but there's other moves like the core moves, kick, knee, and special, that people, about half the people say they know some of its frame data, which is good. Um, and then the blue is people use often. So as you can see, most people built their game around blocking and kicking, right? That's just cool stats to think about. Cool. So now we can return back to the triangle. We've heard what top players think. We have a better idea of how they've trained. But what do you actually do to get better? Like, why is the game hard, and how do you get over those barriers? How do you make it hard for somebody else and easy for yourself? Those are all very important questions. But we'll start with Marcus describing some of his strategies, his approach to playing the game.
Strategy. I think I have strategies. Working on them. They weren't working out, so I just had to basic. Told you about my knee baits. Couldn't get it to work on real people. Well, I figured out I could walk, have them knee, and then walk forward, knee their knee, and just a bunch of tricks that I saw you do. Perfectly spaced donkey kick, and what's my good one? For a while, I tried to hit people with forward dashes, but it was way laggier than I thought, so I had to cut that. Well, you can just react and kick it. Um, what else? What's my strategy? Well, in general, kind of like mental awareness that people will get tired of shimming. People get antsy in corners.
Yeah.
Um, and then for some reason, across the board, even like good players, I think they go for guard breaks. One
Hit too
life
early.
bar peplet too early. Even the good players did. I'm like, what's happening?
Yeah, I don't know why they were missing that.
Yeah,
That confused
I don't get
me.
it.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, we've been playing games a long time. We have some of our favorite fighters, which I'll show here. This is a classic Justin Wong versus Daigo. Two, both of these fighters are some of my favorite players, and this game, Street Fighter Third Strike, is the quintessential like footsies shimmying Street Fighter game. So you can see the movement here, back forth, back forth, back forth, back forth. They're both doing it. They're both trying to play on the very edge, right there. And that was a whiff punish, right? He kicked out, and then Chung Li kicked him back. So yeah, this Third Strike has a lot of moves, but you see that they're not really they are using more moves, but essentially when you're playing footsies, you're not thinking about a ton of different moves. You're thinking about what's the one move, one or two moves I can do to really to, to get off this edge and gain my advantage and press my advantage. Uh, so it's hard to see a video like this from some of your favorite players and not want to play like them. So when I shimmy because they shimmied. And when I just randomly put in kicks and parries like that, I do it because I saw these players do it. Um, Part of the reason why we play these games and is to play like them because it's exciting, right? It looks good. It's intense, and you never know who's gonna win half the time. And this moment here, this is the match that the Evo moment. This is the match that contains the Evo moment, and it's that moment alone that got so many people into playing fighting games seriously because we had no idea something amazing like this was even possible. So that was just
I didn't even
uh,
I didn't even consciously realize that footsies in general probably came from the Third Strike series.
oh,
I
not
knew
even
it, I
previous
knew the
Street
Third Strike
Fighters.
had it, but I don't think it existed before Third Strike series. Because of
I,
course Street Fighter Two is defined by Fireball spam.
That's interesting. I'm gonna have to see what the Daigo match. I mean, yeah, I'm gonna have to look at really good matches from back in the day with Afro Cole and Daigo and other people. You're right. This game may have defined it, at least in this particular style. Um, cool. So
Wait, stop before the Evo moment?
I'm gonna turn it up then. Here we go. Oh, the whole match is like, yeah, only 3 minutes. So here we go.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, second game like went hard, Justin, and then yeah,
Let's go,
still it's looking
Justin.
bleak.
So Ken on the
Has to
left,
switch sides.
low health, right? About to die, but you still gotta play. In the fighting game, you never are out. Never are out. You still can always do something with one hit point left. You're actually just as deadly with one hit point left for the most part. Oh, Parry. Oh, she whip punished that from that far away. You have no health,
Yeah,
Daigo. What are you gonna do? What are you
I
gonna
don't think he was trying to. I don't think he was trying to cancel into it either. That'd have been way too far away. Confirmed.
do? I'm still screaming about this. That's amazing. It's just so that's what's amazing about fighting games. We always want to believe that when you're down, you're not out, right? You always want to believe that you can win no matter what. I've seen people give up in plenty of different other games, racing games. They've already lapped you, give up. Shooting games, they have like 30 kills up on your team, give up, right? Like comebacks in some games and in some situations seem nearly impossible, but in a game like this where you have one hit point left, it is probable, right? We've seen it happen more than once. This is not the first time something like this has happened across the genre. People doing amazing things where their backs to the wall and they're like, I don't think so. I'm still gonna win this. It's amazing. So yeah, for every player, for every game that you play, you're gonna have to come up with the strategies yourself. You're gonna have to have a reason for why you hit the buttons, and a lot of players, their reason is because my favorite player did it. It's not good enough. it can get you it can get you into the game and it can get you started, but really you need a reason for everything that you do. And some of the reasons need to be rooted in the game's logic. So you can see here on this diagram everything that I know about these moves, every single thing. The circles are things you can do. The gray boxes are things that you can know. So normals cannot be punished on block with other normals. That's something you can know. It's not you don't do anything. You just know that they can't punish you. The tip range can be countered on block, cannot be countered on block. That's something you can know when you tip this knee. There's nothing you can do, near almost nothing, to punish them back for it from a single hit. Look all this data, right? For even though this move is one button or two buttons, like you hold forward and hit the attack button, all this information. You can slightly delay the second attack in a 2-on-1. You can put a slight walk forward before the knee and it adds a parry window. I copied that one twice. You can put I copied it 3 times. You can whiff, punish, knee, or kick on reaction. That's like the staple of the game. That's why they made mini games on it. You can hold the input to partially charge and have more options if the charge move is needed. So on and so forth, right? Like there's lots of little things to know, even though the move seems very, very simple. And each one of these things is a situation that you can build a strategy around. Startup, is it fast? Is it slow? Active, is it easy to react to and punish on recovery? Is it? If they hit me on my block, what can I do? So on and so forth, right? Every move in this game has a complexity to it. Different way to input, different properties, different frame data. And then using it in the actual match, you can have very specific things you can learn about how it works, right? That's already a knowledge race that starts the moment you touch the controller for the first time till when you quit the game, right? There's almost always something to know in some form or fashion. Um, so let's take a look. So I want to map some of your strategies, but essentially the game's so simple. A lot of times people have a hard time explaining their strategy and what they do. But for the sake of everything, take a look at this, right? This is the what I consider to be the entire strategy space of Footsies. I feel like there's almost no scenario, no situation that I don't have covered in this diagram, in this tree. Uh, and everyone starts with something very basic, like get close and attempt to connect a kick, right? That's me and the Kirby trying to do it. And when you start playing the game, maybe you try to kick them and they block it, right? And you go, oh, that's crazy, that's cool. And then you go back to it. Try to get in close and kick, they block it. Huh. Try to get carry, close and kick, maybe you hit confirm and you go, huh, I hit it, and you're good enough to execute a special and get a KO, right? But a lot of times you can play the entire game with just these two or three parts of the tree, right? There's nothing wrong with this because it's made out of the core interactions of the game. There's no way it cannot work, and because the game's so simple, there's probably going to be useful in some context. So this you could play the entire game and be happy and have fun just doing this, right? But it doesn't mean that there aren't more things to consider. So you can see all the possible things to consider. For example, getting close, attempt to connect a kick, goes into what if they parry the first hit? What can you do? What can you do? Well, if they were charging an uppercut, they can buffer an uppercut and punishing and KO you. So that's not good. Most people can't do that. So you might expect them to. What you can do as the attacker is follow up with a special attack, right? And when you follow up with a special attack, they can parry the second hit. And if they parry the second hit, they can mash out a combo and KO you guaranteed. That's why you see this little KO marker. So that's the end of that tree. But if they don't parry the second kick, they get kicked in the teeth. So let me just do this. And they get hit. So that's just one scenario, right? One thing that can happen if both you and your opponent hit the buttons in these ways in this particular for these particular reasons. But there's more, right? There's more here, there's more there, there's more out there, and everything starts with something basic, right? Block a normal attack. Well, what can you do? Check if they did not tipper their normal. So if they are anything but the maximum range, you can buffer a demon in the hit pause and kill them. That's crazy. Or you can attempt a one frame link and uppercut them. Very rare, very hard, but possible, right? And even though the game's so simple, there's all this stuff to know. Like emergent possibilities are all accounted for in this tree. So if we take a step back and we just look at it, the attacking triangle is pointed up and to the right, and you can see most of the complexity is involved with attacking, right? And very little complexity is involved in blocking. Blocking straightforward, but you can see there's some stuff to it. It's just not nearly as complex as attacking. And grabbing is pretty straightforward. And because you can only do one of these moves in a set, all these techniques that I have, you can only attempt it once, and that's it. So much less complex there. And see how these are like all or nothings? You whiff punish and uppercut on reaction, or you just whip out a special move and maybe you'll hit it. If it works, you get a point, great. If not, there's not much else to say, right? These are really risky, high risk, high reward maneuvers. But if you want to play more safe, if you want to press your advantage through your knowledge of the game, the only way you can do that is by understanding this flow for yourself and picking the options that continue the flow to go, right? So in some of these, you can just do something risky and bet the farm and then lose really quickly. But if you know what you're doing, you can take it from this relatively simple and safe start to here, to layer 2, to layer 3, to layer 4, to layer 5, to layer 6, right? The further out you put, the less likely other people are going to be familiar with what's happening. The less knowledge they're going to have, the worse they can react. The more they're going to put into a state of novelty. They're going to be like, what's happening? And you're going to be like, of course it's happening, right? That in itself is an advantage. So playing at a high level in footsies can largely involve pushing the match into this area rather than this area, right? So that's one way to describe it. If you have more bubbles, you got more, what we call a bigger book, right? You have more options to choose from. Let's say you keep doing this and your opponent keeps KOing you every time, right? You do this, they KO you. You do this, they KO you. And you're like, I hate this. Well, if these are the only things you know how to do, you are going to lose. But in your strategy space, you're like, you know what? Screw getting close and attempting to kick, and screw getting close and attempting the knee. I'm just gonna specialize in this special kick, right? You can shift the entire focus of their advantage into this new area and test whether or not they know how to KO you in these ways, right? As a player, you use what control you have to gain advantages, but also to remove your opponent from certain possibilities, right? If you never want them to beat you um, after blocking your attack, then never throw an attack that can be blocked, right? You have some control over that.
What's that?
What?
Raging Demon?
Where?
An attack that can't be blocked.
I mean, like, if you don't want them to like block any of your attacks and then punish you because it's laggy or whatever,
Okay.
just don't throw out any attacks. Whiff punish everything and do it from a distance that can't be blocked. Raging demon, or just be annoying and run run the whole time. It's possible, right? So what is very difficult to describe and show for other people, I hope is evident in looking at this map. None of these things are like none of these things are out of the blue, right? No one could go, whoa, I can't believe after you block an uppercut at non-max range, you can punish them. Whoa, like, of course, like, you've seen it. You probably had it happen to you. You've probably done it to other people. And that's one thing that you can remember, or even just run through your mental simulation and figure out. Not a big deal. But the complexity comes from being able to think about every single one of these and how they flow into each other. And if you don't take notes, if you don't write things down, you pretty much cannot keep all this in your head. You cannot. At some point, you need to organize. At some point, you need to review. At some point, you need to prune. Very, very much less efficient for not writing things down. Um, but yeah, all these interactions are things you can think of, but can you think of exactly how they flow into each other? Can you think of exactly what the frame data is? Follow up with a normal attack because you're +3. Like, did you know you were +3, right? Uh, do you know how close you have to be to do this, whatever, a backdash, right? After they break you, right? Do you know how much distance you get? Like, these are all additional um, things that you can think about or understand that puts the mental simulation of the game in more and more accurate terms in your head. Uh, and essentially, you're playing out of your head when you're playing these games. A lot of people think it's about fast fingers and fast reactions, but really, it's about what goes in your head. That's why they are. That's why fighting games are strategy games. The biggest aspect of them is that it's really all about what you put in your head. Um, and if you have half this branch, half the branches, that's what's in your head, and that's what you're going to rely on. If you have just two bubbles in the center and you can only do two attacks, that's what's in your head, and that's what you're going to rely on. And until you expand your mind and set yourself up for learning all these other potential interactions, you'll never think about them. You're never going to understand how far out some of these branches are. And even if you like hit buttons randomly and do it, you're not going to understand how to get there or how risky it was or how to make your opponent get there. Like, it's just so much to learn even with a game this simple, but it's all right in front of you. And the biggest mistake I think people make is thinking that they can just do everything in their head. Why? We can't write books all in our head. We have to write them down on paper. We can't write music all in our head and expect other people to play along. Like, that's just too much complexity. You have to start using something to help you manage all that complexity. Any thoughts there?
No, I didn't take any notes. As you saw from my survey,
Oh
I didn't delve very far into the chart. Um,
yeah.
all my strategies were pretty primitive. They're probably not well. I should probably see where they're represented on the chart, if anywhere. But
Uh, yeah.
most of my playtime in Footsies was just doing training mode.
Mhm. Yeah.
All the secrets, mental secrets you have to discover, and simple reacting on the edge of
Mhm.
reaction time.
So So yeah, let me just switch screens real quick, or let me see if I have and screen capture. Okay, cool. I'm just gonna switch real quick to this thing over here. Yeah, so this is Enlighten. Um, it's pretty much a game that takes the entire learning experience that we're talking about now, with all of its complexity and tricks and nuances, and puts it into one cohesive experience. It's a game that starts you off with just a few things like a lecture hall and puzzle mode, and soon you get explore mode, which is pretty much like training mode, and you get records and ways to look at your stats, and so on and so forth. But one of the big takeaways for this game is that the kind of understanding and deep high level play you need to, perfect all these different puzzles, and to understand how they connect, right? And to search for more connections and to study these connections and to know how long it takes to get from one to the other. That's just like understanding all these branching connections in the fighting game diagram I showed you. And this is all things that you experience naturally when playing the game, but if you don't think about them explicitly, it's hard for you to develop strategies that take it to the next level. And that's why getting good seems so impossible to people. People are like, how do you do it? And you're like, it's the same thing you've been doing. You just need to not forget what you think, and then you need to keep thinking stuff. Like, never let your curiosity settle. You always need to keep thinking. Um, and likewise, this game lets you take notes, and when you take notes, it stores all your notes conveniently in this column, and you can check your notes. Like, these are all the notes too. You can check on what they say, and you type. You can edit them. You can type them, whatever. But yeah, this game shows in a very direct way that there is no magical button. There's no secret technique. There's no hidden way to, use your brain or get this many hours of sleep and all of a sudden you're going to think like a genius. It's really just the culmination of every tiny, seemingly simple observation, every single thing you notice, and then organizing those things into categories and concepts that make sense to you. That's the secret, right? And let me switch back. So the secret is, I like to tell people there's no secret. Like, some you can even watch people playing even when they're beginners. They play the game and they may mutter to themselves, "Huh, that was weird," but then they forget. They forget that they say it. They forget what was weird, and if they forget it, then their brain can't ever process it later and then add it to this huge collection of their understanding, right? And I try to encourage people, take every single thing you think is weird, every single observation you can like realistically keep track of, and hold on to it, because that's what makes you good. Um, there's other things, watching your matches and stuff, but for the core of it, you become a good strategist when you have possibilities understood. Footsies is a simple enough game that I'm able to map out every single strategy. Chess is so complicated that I can't map out every single strategy after like two moves. It's way too many possibilities very quickly. But for footsies, you can. And if you had this in your brain, you'd be able to do all kinds of things, right? Um, hmm. So I made a couple of filters. Where are we? So, you know, with the chart and every single possibility mapped out, I can map out what other players do and what they don't do, what they probably know and what they don't know, right? Because it's all connected in this big web. I can also hide things, right? So this secret technique, it's not really secret. You beat the arcade mode, it tells you, but essentially, if you don't have it, you lose access to all these strategies down here, and you lose access to all these strategies right here, right? It's important to know that. Um, if you can't parry, if you're the kind of person who can't parry, you just never learned it, can't get the reactions or the buttons right, as an offensive player, you lose all these. And if you can't whiff punish, which is one of the core things they teach you in the game, you lose all these, right? Where it's like set yourself up to whiff punish and KO, set yourself up, set yourself up.
Mm-hmm.
You lose those, right? And if you, yeah, so those are all the ones I mapped out so far. But when I'm playing someone, I go, that's weird. The person never did this. And in my mind, I don't think it explicitly, but in my mind, I'm like, well, if they don't think this, then whew, and all these possibilities that they have disappear. I'm like, then I can do this, right? If they never throw this kick out in neutral, right? Then they are never going to do these. And I stopped thinking about doing these too. There are certain counters in here, like walking back is preemptive, blocking is simple, um, walking in and hitting them before they hit you is a specific timing to get that counter hit. But I stop thinking about it if I never see them do it because they're never going to do it, right? And in my brain, I can put more energy into other things on the fly. And it allows me to go like, oh man, he did the thing. Like I saw a match. I'll show you this. It's really cool. FunDOmentals Monday. So I entered a tournament, and all the purple dots are things I saw other players do to the best of my ability because I was cooking and also busy. But a lot of players did this basic thing. So everything core, right, in the darkest circles, the basic attacks used in a fairly straightforward way. So I saw this happen twice. I saw this happen once. I saw this happen twice. Opening the match and just letting a special rip and getting a KO. I saw I saw people do dashing demons a lot, but none of the other demon techniques. None of these others. I have so many different types, and the only ones people do are dashing demons or the standard standing demon. Um, People shimmy like crazy, so I added my green bubble there as well because I shimmied. And the green things were the things that I recognized that I was doing well, and the red things were things that I needed to stop doing, and yellow was just like investigate further. Like I color coded it as I went along, but essentially this is what is happening in your brain too. And the more organized your thoughts are ahead of time, the more quickly you can be like, huh, I think this whole branch is bad. I'm not going to do any of this anymore and just quickly shift over here. Um, so that was a lot of fun tracking that. So fighting games at their core are real time. We got the real time part, uh, melee combat. So punches, kicks, those are melee moves. So good. Strategy game. You saw the strategy spread right there. Human versus check, and then this last one balanced around double blind interplay. Right. Uh, Double blind interplay happens when you don't. It's when you have to make a decision and your opponent has to make a decision and you can't react to the other person's decision when you're making it. So in real time, that's pretty much happening all the time. Like in that present moment, you can't react to what they're doing because it's the present moment. But the way it shakes out for video games is there are certain times when you do strategies that you have to throw out a guess or a read. Um, like an uppercut, you just let rip. Like I'll show you right here. I'll put the computer on CPU. And this move I'm going to do here, the one he just did, that's a super risky move. If you land it, great. If not, oh, you die, right? Missed. Nope. So if I'm trying to do this in neutral, I'm trying to guess when they're gonna attack. Like now. Nope, he didn't do it. Like that was a pure guess. There's nothing you can do but guess. Ah, you got me.
Wow.
Yep. So like that's clearly risky. It's clearly unsafe. But if you get it, you feel so good. And I can't get it. No. Nope. He didn't. He's a computer, so he's not afraid of my advance. There. Guessed and got him. So it's powerful, but obviously has that flaw. A lot of interactions are like that in the game, right? When you're sticking out your leg, you really don't know whether or not they're going to stick out their leg or stick out a punch or block. You really have to throw it out to the best of your strategic ability, pick moves that you think are safer or better, and then see what happens and keep rolling with it. Um, that's essentially what we mean by double blind. And rock, paper, scissors works that way. You know, you throw your hand, you don't know what your opponent's going to throw, and in that moment, you're like, how did it resolve? But fighting games do it. I'm not going to say every frame, but it's constantly happening. You are constantly adjusting to what they do and oftentimes picking options that are at the edge of that, like risky, not risky. If I win, great. If I lose, this sucks. Edge, right? A lot of players try to not be on that edge, but it's always there. There's nothing you can do in this game that is completely unsafe. As you can see, this triangle, everything can be countered in some form or fashion. Some things are harder than others, like these demons. Some things are riskier than others. However, if you decide to do a thing in that moment, if they decide to do a better thing, a thing that beats it, you lose, right? And you can never escape that, at least not in Footsies, right? So that's kind of what's interesting about fighting games in general. No matter how far out the branch gets, it still comes down to how some of these basic interactions interact, right? It's like, for a crude metaphor, if rock, paper, scissors, if two people threw rock and it advanced, if two people throw the same hand in rock, paper, scissors, and then you get 5 options to choose from instead of 3, and then you get 7 options if those clash, and then so on and so forth, well, that's kind of like going deeper and deeper into the branching tree of strategy here. But that only happens if you have a very certain condition met. But if you don't, you're still playing straight up rock, paper, scissors, right? Like you're trying to beat their hand, and it's only in certain situations when the interaction is either neutral or goes back and forth, can you press into this layer. And only when these things happen can you press into this layer. And only in a certain situation can you press into this layer, right? So it's great to know it, but the bulk of the knowledge is still playing on the edge of reactions, distance, spacing, timing, and that's why Footsies is such a great game. It stays true to the name. It's still always about fighting. It's still always about spacing, and you can have all the fancy tricks in the world, but if you're not paying attention to what your opponent is doing or likely to do, if you're not keeping track of their habits and their tendencies, then you could lose just because of these basics are always going to be true in the gameplay. And I think that's something other strategy games can't do, right? StarCraft and other games are built on these economies, right? And these economies have a certain slippery slope to them, a certain the rich get richer building momentum, and you're trying to disrupt your opponent's economy while also scouting information and building team compositions that beat what compositions they have. But that's like a tech race, right? That's why they call it teching up. And the longer the match goes, the more fancy units and upgrades and stuff they get. And it's always just like, whoa, we got to like a 30-minute match and now carriers are flying everywhere and this is nuts. That's StarCraft. No matter if you have a 30-minute fighting game match or a 2-second fighting game match, it's only going to be this. Only. We played 99-minute matches in Smash Brothers. It's still just this. Same moves you have access to on frame 1 as it's going to be the move you have access to on minute 50, and so on and so forth, right? So fighting games are all about building a gameplay experience that has a ton of strategy, but also has this edge that you can never forget. And even if you're not like a super skilled, knowledgeable, brainy, nerdy type, and you don't want to think about all this, which a lot of people don't. A lot of people play by feel, but um, even if you don't want to, the core of the game is still very, very well understood. If they attack, you can block. If they if they block, maybe you can grab them. If they grab, attack, right? Like, and that will almost always hold true. There's obviously these little exceptions, but it holds true. You don't have to be a calculating mastermind genius to play rock paper scissors, but and there will be situations where it will reveal how much you know and don't know, and you could do some dumb stuff. So that's a thing. All that makes sense.
Yeah, of course it makes sense to me. I've been around this whole time.
Yeah.
I'm the rhetorical audience. Yeah.
But what about the one thing? Um, so I was very impressed that Footsies even had a strategy space that looked like this. When I first touched it, I was really expecting something like just this much, the second layer maybe, and it goes to layer six. That's intense. It's incredible. The connections between them aren't straightforward. Like sometimes they go laterally, sometimes they go outward, right? I didn't expect that. Sometimes the situations you put yourself in at the edge of one branch here cycles back over and puts you into a space over here. It's kind of hard to diagram that, but it happens. And when you're talking about skill, the dexterity you need to play this game well is essentially at its hardest, you need to be able to input complex inputs really fast. That's why speed is spiked here. It's beyond just mashing buttons. It's harder. And there's a couple of techniques where if you're holding the buttons in odd ways that um, if you're holding the button in odd ways, it could be difficult to like awkward for you to release the buttons, but not too much skill involved with that. Like the game is simple for a reason, and it tried to keep the input complexity very low. In terms of reflexes, it's high, right? That edge we talked about, it's right here. The whiff punish is recognizing one situation versus another and doing one thing versus another. That's what we call a choice reflex test, and I call it a stimulus response curve, or how much worse your reflexes get the more things you have to analyze. So that's why Footsies is spikes on that one as well. And just keeping track of moving players as they move around the screen requires dynamic visual acuity, but the game is so simple. Like this is barely stressing your skills in that aspect at all. Timing. Now, fighting games are real-time strategy games using melee attacks. So timing is the real timing part of it, and you can know the frame data a little bit. You can be really tight on your timings of your attacks, or you can do frame perfect punishes. And let me tell you, a one frame link is as hard as it gets because the game is in 60 frames per second. So whether you're playing Street Fighter 4, I think the Sako combo was a one frame link where he does that like low medium kick into an extended hard punch that cancels 2 and 1 into a spiral arrow. But whether you're playing Street Fighter 4 or Footsies, that is hard. It's just as hard. Maybe even harder in Footsies because you can't piano key techniques like you can in Street Fighter. So yeah, this is hard. That's why it spikes. External timing, just knowing how space relates to movement and how attacks recover. Acceleration, deceleration. There's subtle things that happen when you hit them, when you block them, or when they parry. The timing of the game changes. Parries, that dramatic effect lasts a little longer. Blocking is medium, and then when you hit them, it recovers more quickly. So if you're not kind of taking your time scale and accelerating or decelerating it as you see these things happen, that's hard. So I put that as a medium. And then in general, complex timings, people shimming back and forth, doing different attacks, moving, having. There's techniques where if their attack is a pixel off, maybe 2 pixels, it's the difference between it being good and it being bad. So being able to see that, being able to know how your movement pushes you in and out of that bleeding edge is difficult. Yeah, but as you can see here, when you're playing footsies, your working memory is taxed. You really do have to keep track of a lot of data in real time. Your linear memory, your muscle memory, learning some of these demon techniques that I have down here, Not easy. This one's complicated. Personal Demon's the most complicated one. I got all these notes on it. So that's possible. So I spiked it there. Long-term memory, you got to learn the core rules and the frame data and then the metagame. So most of the time, knowing how players play and what player you're going to play up against is quite difficult to keep up with that knowledge. So I put it here. But for the most part, your analyzation skills are being stressed in spikes, right? You can play the game generally and have a general strategy, but it's when you have a game plan that's a tree like this, even if your tree is a baby tree, right? That's when you're thinking logarithmically. How does this flow into this, flow into this, flow into this? Like, how can I take it from this situation to this in a series of clear steps? That's logarithmic thinking right there, or algorithmic, same thing. Uh, So yeah, if you look at the skill spectrum overall, Footsies as designed captures some of the core elements of playing a fighting game, tries to do it by reducing the knowledge needed as much as possible, and gets out of the way with a lot of these other skills by making it quite lean. Um, so again, hats off to Footsies because this game blew away my expectations. So we'll do another stream some other time. On the plan here is when we're going to extract lessons from other fighting games we played, other videos we watch of other fighting game players and how they talk about their strategies, and even other hobbies in life in general. We're going to try to take what we learned about learning by using footsies, by playing footsies, and we're going to try to extract that and compare it to everything else, right? Because essentially, if there's no secret to getting good, and it's really a lot of the simple things that you either ignored or didn't want to do, then that's the case for fighting games. It's the case for complex fighting games. It should be the case for strategy games. It should be the case for every single type of game or learning situation. We all learn the same way, and every time we pick up a controller in a new game, we're using the same old way we learn in a new context, and it shows us just how good or bad those habits actually are. But some of the takeaways we're going to look into next time is, how the strategy space, I'm going to organize it by like which options are reads, reactions, or which ones you have to prepare for, which options are offensive and defensive, which options require really precise timing and which ones don't. Um, Things like that to really give you a sense that, yeah, these are your options, but not all these options are weighted equally, kind of a thing. Um, some of the concepts that I want to drive home is what's hard for you as a player is probably hard for everyone else if they do it exactly how you do it. People who think they have bad reactions when whip punishing and just trying to like stare at the screen and then hit the button at the right time, that will always be hard for you. It will always be hard for somebody else. That's not the technique that I use to whip punish. I use a technique that makes it a lot easier for myself. And because of that, if you didn't know that that was a possibility, you might think, man, this game's not for me, or fighting games aren't for me, or whatever. There's all kinds of things that when people experience hardship, they extrapolate and say, well, then I must be bad at it. Maybe I can never get good at it, and other people must have some inherent ability that makes them good at it. I'm trying to explain to you that that is not true. For the vast majority of situations and skills here, it's not true. So if you just take a step back when you're playing something and go, wait a minute, I'm not alone in this, and everyone else is probably the same, that starts to get you to shift your mindset and try new things, which I think is incredibly important for improving at anything. Kind of want to explain that depth is about increasingly situational, nuanced, and precise optimizations. So when people are like, oh, this game's deep, yeah, it's deep, blah, 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 like what it really means is there's possibility space or strategy space like this. And every time you move out on the ring, it's going to require more knowledge. It's going to be less, likely to happen. So it's more situational. Oftentimes it's going to require a precise use of that knowledge or maybe more and more precise timing because you're doing one thing after the other. So by nature, it's getting harder. But these are optimizations, right? And if you push it into these zones, you should have more advantages than your opponent has, and therefore that's why you did it in the first place. But that's all there is to it. Depth isn't some magical, mysterious thing. It isn't something that some games like are just imbued with and other games aren't. If you can do this in a roughly organized way, your game has that much depth. And even though I feel like I maxed out the depth in Footsies, it's not a race to be the deepest game ever. It's having enough depth to make people enjoy exploring it. That's the biggest thing. Um, so, I put so many hours in writing down this chart and exploring these fringe possibilities. And I think people need to realize you have diminishing returns on that. Um, kind of like the 80-20 rule. The first things you learn about something are going to be the things you use. The first 20% of the things you learn are going to be used 80% of the time. It's because those are the fundamentals. And then you're going to be spending so much time researching and labbing for a tiny little bump on a tiny little bump. Use the pre-parried technique to make the forward input a parry for more safety using the demon personal demon technique, which is being able. I'll show you. It's really cool. It's really cool. So let me just resume. So this is a demon. It's forward, forward, or it's attack, attack, forward, attack, attack. And if you do it fast enough, you do a little demon dash like that. Like that. So you can see how throwing out an attack just to get that thing started could get you whiff punished and killed. That's dangerous. Also, this move is precious. You get one a set, so you don't want to waste it. So I tried to figure out a way to confirm it and have like a guaranteed execution so people can't get out of it. And I realized if you could hit someone like this, they're so close, they can't avoid the demon at all. So I looked at the input map, I looked at the frame data, and I looked at how quickly the input windows decay, and I came up with this. It's really cool. It's you forward dash, and in the forward dash you input the two punches, and then after that you tap forward because it needs that forward element, punch, punch, forward, punch, punch, and then you hit attack slightly after attacking forward, which turns into a knee, right? And then if you just mash after that, you complete the input, and it does a demon in their face. That's why I call it the up and personal demon. So let's see if I can do it. Nope, not there. There. I confirm it with the knee, and then I complete the sequence and do a demon. That is near unescapable. And understanding why requires a lot of knowledge on how the frame data works and knowledge on how the demon works and all this junk, and nobody probably cares about this in the entire world. The developers probably don't know about this. All the other players, I could probably guarantee you, don't know about this. And yet I spent hours trying to figure it out, and I think it's great. It just lights my brain on fire, seeing all the different, putting all the pieces of knowledge together where every single aspect. The punch has this piece of knowledge. The in between the punch, you can do this. You can hit the back arrow right here in between your last two punches to execute a demon with a small step back. Every single thing that I know and observe and notice basically builds up this huge knowledge base that you can see here, which powers the curiosity to explore the huge strategy space, which allows me to eventually get to the fringes, the absolute edge of optimizations in the absolute edge of situational nuanced situations that I'll probably never get into. But it's fun. Nothing stops you from digging deep. It's just a matter of, are you willing to put in the time? You're not going to find something game changing the further out in the branches you get right here. It's just going to be more and more nuanced and more situational. But it's going to allow you to prepare. It's going to allow you to be more flexible in your strategy and react better if other people do it to you. That's important. Frame data makes your mental model more accurate. So all these interactions in here, the basic numbers that go behind it, this frame data here, I pretty much have it memorized. So I don't have to think like, oh, what can he do if I do this? I just calculate the number and then I know what they can do just because the data is just a very precise way to measure timing. So if you're thinking about the skill ceiling or mastery, you're going to need memorization in order to build your mental model of the strategies. You're going to need heuristics in order to identify patterns, general patterns on the fly. You need a logarithmic thinking to have the strategy flowchart and go from one thing to the other. And you're going to need to be able to take all this data and be able to process it forward, backwards, in and out, whatever, while you're playing. You're going to need the experience to learn all the different ways that people play suboptimally and all the different ways you can incorporate some of these things. And that ultimately makes up how you master footsies. That's why it takes many, many hours to do so. Uh, there's nothing, I mean, because the game is this deep, mastering it is also going to take a lot of time. There's nothing trivial about it. And it's nothing in the complexity of the game itself that makes you think, oh, I'll be able to master this in no time. That's just not how it works. Playing an opponent is about speaking the same language or getting the opponent to speak the language you want. In matches, if they're not doing a whole thing, you can't just be like, come on, do the thing so I can do my favorite part of the branch. Come on. It's not happening. If they don't do it, they don't do it. Like, there's nothing you can do, but they are doing something. Everyone is always doing something. And if you have enough branches across the entire map, instead of just white knuckling it and just sticking it out and trying to force this to happen. You're like, oh, you're doing this? Okay, I'll go over here. Fine. I have some branches over here. Oh, you're doing that? Fine. I'll go over here. No big deal. And the faster you can switch like that, the smarter your play is. Um, you're engaging them on what they're doing instead of trying to ignore them, right? And that's super important. You can't ignore your opponent in a fighting game because at the end of the day, if they hit a button in a timing you're not expecting, you could just die. You could just lose straight up. That's just how it works. That's why the core of fighting games really do depend on this double-blind interplay at its core. Smart play is about getting the most results from your test and not picking the safest tests. So when you're playing, once you realize that you're never like 100% safe, the next best thing to do is to play in a way that confirms or at least gives you a lot of good information on what your opponent knows and what they don't know. If I could do one strategy and figure out that this whole top part of the branch you have no idea about, I'll do it. And I'll even lose a match or a round trying to figure that out because that's worth it. Because then I know later I just push straight into the strategy zone, you'll lose like almost every time. So playing effectively is not just having the map. It's also gaining a sense of what your opponent's map is and finding ways to test it very, very quickly. There's this general concept of confidence in fighting games where if you hit the button like a frame ahead of your opponent, sometimes that can be the difference between winning and losing. And a lot of times, even if you have a strategy, if you're not confident in it, you're going to delay that by hundredths of a second, and that matters. It's amazing how differently you play when you just don't give an F. And you just hitting buttons, exploring your strategy space, and having fun. It actually tangibly results in an advantage most of the time. And it's really interesting how you can see confidence through strategy like that. So even if you have a bad strategy, if you're confident and you execute it faster than they expect you to, and you get out faster than they expect you to, who says it's bad, right? Like a lot of people don't understand that fighting games give you a possibility space where you're never safe and suboptimal play can be the right move for the right at the right time for the right person. And that's why even though this strategy space looks super efficient, like, oh, doing this into this is assuming perfect timing, right? If they counterattack with a freaking attack like this after being broken or whatever, if they delay that follow-up hit just because they're thinking slowly or their fingers are cold or whatever, that could change how the rest of these branches go. You got to have experience knowing how players play suboptimally, and you got to account for it. That means another way of explaining that is you have to take almost everything you can possibly take observation-wise about your opponent, put it in your head, and then fight them where it really matters up in here. And that's really why fighting games are amazing. It's amazing that Footsies allows that to happen, considering how elegant and simple it is. And it's amazing in every single fighting game that does it, which is pretty much every single fighting game. Um, Yeah, fighting games work because they have an irresolvable interplay and because it forces you to play on the edge. Players try to avoid these situations as much as possible because the edge is an edge and the edge is hard to stay on. Um, I don't have a really good way of showing it on this chart, but some of these things are much, much safer than others. And if you don't understand that your opponent is doing something safe, you could think that they're doing something unsafe and be walking straight into a trap. Um, so even though at the very core of fighting games, you're never safe doing anything, you know, if your opponent doesn't know it, it's like you're never threatened by it. So, what was I gonna say? Oh, so if you had a choice, because you have the entire strategy space in your head to pick a strategy that makes you look vulnerable, but you're actually not, and allows you to easily kill them if they fall for your trap, or if you're going to go for something risky and you're guessing and it's a 50-50 and you hope for the best, which one are you going to pick? Well, you're going to pick the one that you can do safely and react and not have to stress your brain out. So players are going to pick the strategies that keep them off the edge as much as possible. And it's up to you to recognize what they're doing, where the edge is, and bring the edge back into play and even shift it back in your favor. Put them on the edge and you need to step off the edge and go, now I'm safe. Now I have the advantage. And your understanding of where those lines are and how they shift is your ability to play fighting games well. Um, I think that's kind of a hard thing to explain. But yeah, at any strategy game whatsoever, if there's an option that people can pick that's safer, most of the time they're going to pick it. And if that's a barrier to you, if you just simply don't know how to get around it, then you just straight up lose. And when you're exploring a fighting game or any game for yourself, you should try to find those strategies as quickly as possible. What kinds of things you can do that confuse your opponent, make them fall for your traps, and if they don't know how to beat it, they just straight up lose. That's power. And a lot of people look at fighting games and go, whoa, that guy's beating him down. That guy couldn't do anything. Whoa, that must be how fighting games are played. Those strategies are rare. They are broken when the other person learns what to do. So you ride them as long as you can, you find as many as you can, and you get ready to fight on the edge when they force you to. That's a really accurate and universal way of describing what it means to play a fighting game competitively. Cool. Any final words, Marcus? Any did that shed any mystery the way I explained it? Because we've played Smash Brothers in so many ways, and the only time I was exceptionally good at Smash Brothers was basically when I followed the advice. Right? It was Melee. I played the game for fun. I took a bunch of notes. I explored stuff just because I thought it was just so freaking cool playing Kirby, and I labbed so many nuanced things you wouldn't believe. You wouldn't believe the techniques that I have. There's one where I inhale an opponent, stand on the edge, listen for the controller and how fast they're wiggling, calculate it based on how much damage they have, and then time a turnaround on the ledge to where right when they bust out, their character, as my model is turning, is facing away from the edge. They don't grab it and they slip down and die. Like, what the heck? You're never going to see that. No one else is ever going to know how that works. I'm the only person on the planet who knows those things, and I will never forget. So that's essentially, if I can have a bunch of techniques at that fringe level of nonsense, just think about all the other stuff I knew as Kirby. Being one of the worst characters in the game, I still was able to play well and beat almost everybody I played. That's what it means when you get to like top 8 or whatever. Just because of this. This is fighting games. This is what I had in my head. And like lightning, when somebody did something, I'm like, I would just shift immediately and just start doing all these things that they've never seen before. It's because I'm the only one who explored those with Kirby, because Kirby sucks. But that's a whole different story. But with Brawl, I didn't do it. With Smash 4, I labbed a lot, but I didn't play competitively a lot. So I was like always missing a critical component to playing well ever since I stopped playing Melee. But it's so clear to me now, right? When I played Smash 4, I tried to shove my Mario combos down people's throat, and I just did them over and over. That's the thing I told you not to do. Don't ignore your opponent. You have to speak the same language. That means you have to learn at least partially what language they speak before you can engage with them in a conversation of sorts. You can't ignore them. You can't just wall yourself up into a laboratory and then come out with like the winning answers. Everything you learn always has to be ironed out through into the meta or against live players or whatever. And those are the lessons I had to learn the hard way. I don't know how you would describe some of your approaches, Marcus, but yeah, cool. Yeah, so hopefully all that helped you realize how fighting games work. I have match footage of me playing in a tournament. I have match footage of other players. Lots of cool data to explore, but really this was the conceptual heart and why I wanted to do this deep dive in the first place. To show people, just to show people everything that I talked about, how simple fighting games can be, but how deep and complex and varied and interesting they are once you dig deep. So, that's been us. We'll talk to you next time. If you are curious about what we are, who we do, or what we say, some combination, you can check us out at designoriented.net. Website's down at the bottom. Until next time, guys. Peace.
See you later. Bye.